Hey everybody, this is Linda from Stamping School. This week I'm going to do this pumpkin card in sort of non-traditional colors. This is the Pretty Pumpkins bundle from Stampin' Up! In the Holiday Catalog 2021. I think we're nearing the end of September now, so the weather's just starting to cool off. I've got my windows open here in North Carolina, so I'm feeling fall. I'm also going to show you some comparisons and some tips for this white embossing powder. So the bundle's on page 48, the Pretty Pumpkins bundle with the stamp set and the dies. But my inspiration actually came from the Harvest Meadow Suite and this designer paper that's in there. This is called Harvest Meadow. It comes in 12 by 12 pieces. Look how pretty this is. It's such pretty paper. A lot of people said, you know, it doesn't feel like fall to me because the colors are they're not the traditional rust and green and yellows, but I really love it. I especially love this one, and I love that you can use it for all kinds of occasions. Isn't that pretty? So look how closely this paper matches this stamp set. To me, they were so similar and they went together so well, so that was my inspiration, was to emboss this stamp with the white. For the base of the card, I've got some Misty Moonlight, and then a piece of that Pretty Harvest designer paper. To me, I wanted it to look a little bit like wallpaper here, like the pumpkins were sitting in a room. And this is 1 1/4. Look how pretty that would be. So, oh, I just love this paper. So this will sit down here, almost like a table or tablecloth. Of course, you could make it a tile floor and put a little piece of white here to look like flooring. But I'm shooting for the tablecloth, and the pumpkins will be sitting on the table. All right. Now this guy right here, originally I was going to do him white on white, but he really just disappeared. Or this die, you can actually just do, you know, an open die cut like this right here, but it just sort of fell flat. So what I ended up doing is cutting him out in white. And because this doesn't have a die to cut it out, I took the piece of paper that I cut this from and I traced it. This is my erasable pen that I'll be using later to show you a trick. And then I cut it out. That way I can just glue this on top of here. So, ooh, that's too much. That's okay. I'll use it for something else. I'm just gonna, this is so delicate. Imagine how pretty this would be in gold or copper for the fall. So pretty. And just add that on to what I cut out. And that just makes it pop. I don't have dimensionals on this. I'm not going to glue this part down so that I can add that twine up at the top here in a little bit, right here. All right, let's get to the embossing. Now the first thing to do is get the static off of your cardstock. This is an embossing buddy. We don't sell them anymore, but they are available all over the place. Amazon, the craft store. Sometimes they're called an anti-static tool. But basically, there's just a little bit of powder in here, like a cornstarch and a fine cloth. So you can make your own. Some people just take a little cornstarch and they have it in a container and they just dip it in and then just brush like this with like one of these puffy makeup brushes. You can do that. You can also take some cornstarch and you can put it in something like a knee-high, like a pantyhose, like a fine mesh or a cheesecloth, and you can make your own because they're actually quite pricey online now. I think the least expensive one I found was about $6.79. I'm sad we don't sell them anymore, but I've had this one for 15 years. So once you get one, you're going to have it for a long time. The other thing you can do to kind of reduce your static, you can use a piece of wax paper and rub your cardstock. You can use a used dryer sheet, well used. You don't want to use a new one, it'll get all smeary, but a used one, and you can rub that with that. So you just want to rub your cardstock. And now to get a nice crisp white, you have 2 choices, and I'll show you some experimenting that I did. This is a craft white, which is a pigment, which we still sell. Now in our annual catalog, we sell the craft white ink pad right here, and there's a refill for it, which I would recommend. Now pigment ink is a little bit different. It stays wet a lot longer than our regular dye-based ink pads, so you're gonna need to wait for them to dry, or you're gonna need to heat set them, or use them with a powder. But with the white ink pad, this is what it looks like with no powder. So it's just stamped, and when you stamp it, you know you're expecting a nice crisp white, and it doesn't do that. It's just sort of opaque looking, just kind of a soft look if you want that. And like I said, that dried about 20 minutes. Air dried for 20 minutes to get that. So white ink only isn't going to give you this nice bright white look. Now white ink that's embossed with clear powder really looks icky. That doesn't do anything. So this is white ink stamped, and before it dries, clear embossing powder on top and heat set. Then we get these two, Versamark and the white ink with white embossing powder. And they work pretty closely, but I really like Versamark a little bit better. So the white ink, which is the pigment ink, you're gonna stamp it and then do white powder on top and then heat set it. Now, it's a little tricky to see here, but the white ink has a few more little bubbles in it. It's not quite as crisp as the Versamark pad. My favorite is the Versamark ink pad with the white embossing powder, although this is fine if your image is a little bit larger and bolder like that. I will say my Versamark pad is pretty old and it's got some stains on it, but it doesn't seem to matter. I find that people will email me often and say, does embossing powder go bad? And I'll say, maybe, or you've got an embossing powder that's too grainy and it's not fine enough, or your ink pad isn't inked enough. And if you have a Versamark pad, you want to make sure that you have it inked well. And it's a very thick fluid. It's very hard to squeeze sometimes and just rub it in, but you want to make sure this pad's juicy so the powder has something to stick to. And it's a clear pad, it's sticky, and I'm going to ink up this big stamp right here and get it nice and covered and stamp here. Now Versamark is also a watermark pad, so you could let that dry and it would just be tone on tone. And you have a little bit of time with Versamark. You don't have to rush as much to make sure that it's wet. I'm going to put that white embossing powder on and shake it off. Now if you find you've got some flyaways, which sometimes that happens, if you take a little dry paintbrush, and what I do is I kind of rub them off, but I also blow at the same time. So I just kind of blow them away, and that really gets away any flyaways. Now, the edge of it doesn't matter because I'm going to cut this out, but you just want to look and make sure when you're doing this that you don't have a little mishap there like I just did. So I knocked off a piece of my line, and I'm going to go back and fix it. I'll also show you a little trick for how to fix them after the fact. If you're doing a sentiment and you miss part of it, I'm going to show you how to fix it. Okay, so once you have all of the extra powder knocked off, you've got two choices. You can do regular embossing or you can do under embossing. And sometimes if you have a glitter or something that you don't want to scatter around, the under embossing works great because you're going to heat from the bottom for a few minutes till that sets, and then you can move to the top so it doesn't blow around. I also really like the Stampin' Up! Embossing gun, although it's more expensive than most on the market. It has a high and a low. And so if you're doing something with a color powder or white on a dark cardstock, the low will keep it from blowing around too quickly. Make sure when you're doing white, something that's going to blow around, you get it hot first. So you're not just blowing the cool air all over it. And I just kind of start it on low just to start the process, and then I can switch it to high just to make sure it's not going to blow around. And again, under embossing, you don't want to scorch the paper underneath. Don't get too close. But see, it actually works. It's actually heating it from the underside. And then you can move to the top. And try to avoid doing this, because then you don't know if you're missing something. Also with white, you want to be careful not to turn it yellow or golden just because you've scorched it a little bit. That's good. You want all the lines to be smooth and not rough, and no orange peel looking texture. And there it is. So Versamark and white powder, my favorite combination. I have these pre-cut. Put this on here. Isn't it pretty? I just love it. These little white leaves that came in the set. Ooh, I want to do my linen thread first. So my linen thread, just sort of this natural color. And I'm going to take, if you've been with me a long time, you'll know I use this sewer's wax all the time to kind of help my twines behave. Sort of helps them do what they're supposed to do. Bring this here, tie a little knot on it. And you can still curl it, even though it has the wax on it. You can still bring your scissors in and curl it. Give it a little personality. Now I like this, the way this one's curling already, so I'm just gonna stick that on there, just like that. And then my leaf, it's got a little dimensional under there, that can just go right there. And do I need this leaf? I don't think so. No, I don't need it. Just one leaf is good. And then I put a banner on here where I embossed from the same stamp set. If friends were pumpkins, I'd pick you. So my tip for using the erasable pen, this is the Papermate Eraser Mate. Ages ago, when we first started stamping, we would sign the backs of our cards with the Papermate Eraser Mate and emboss them. It's just like an extra fun little thing to do. So if you mess up on your greeting, like let's say the U didn't come out just right, you can draw it in and fix it and then go back over it with the white embossing powder and then heat it again and it will emboss. These things are so useful. I always have them in the craft room, especially like when I trace that template, you know, you can just erase your lines. And on the inside, so thankful for you, and another little pumpkin down here. And some linen thread, and there's that paper on the inside. I love that misty moonlight and the white together. Thanks for watching, everybody. Go emboss something. We'll see you next time. See it, learn it, stamp it.